Welcome back on the AM show. Now we kickstart our conversation on the educational front, where stakeholders have actually been discussing myriad matters on how to make the system better. Africa Education Watch has a report that shows that there's been a lack of transparency and open governance standards are crippling the educational sector. We're going to delve into that conversation now with our guests, Kofi Asare, who is Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. We also have Peter Anti, Executive Director, Institute for Education Studies. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Morning to your team and Peter and your audience.
Great. So, Kofi, it's interesting times. We've seen that report that you've come out with and bordering on numerous matters. We're going to take them apart bit by bit. But this whole idea of an open governance report on the educational sector, what exactly is it that triggered this idea that you've come forth with?
Well, government policy and vision is to see a Ghanaian society where right information is not constricted, it's actually respected, subject to the restrictions of law, which is the right to information law. And that's why His Excellency the President prioritized the passage of the RTI law and its implementation. We, as an organization, are interested in ensuring there's transparent, accountable, and there's a responsive education sector where the citizenry have access to information on the performance of the agencies which are using their taxes to deliver education service to them. We are interested in seeing a sector where every partner, civil society, media house, has information that is relevant in assessing the performance of these institutions and situates them in a better position to play their key role as watchdogs in society and demand quality service, and also encourage the adoption of these standards in other agencies who are doing so well. That was the driver of this open governance report, which we have launched to be an annual survey that will be conducted among education sector institutions, where they will be ranked and they will be graded on the basis of their adherence to globally accepted open governance standards.
And so that is what has actually triggered this. And you have this open governance index. In fact, you take a look at the Ministry of Education and its 18 agencies. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, I just want you to give us maybe an overall assessment of what this report entails. I know you talk about the right to information, access to information from some of these 18 agencies. You talk about their internet presence, their websites, and all of that, and even collaboration between the different agencies. But in sum, what was the focus of this entire report? What were some of the key findings that you brought to bear?
Well, overall, the ministry and its agencies have made significant strides in creating public interfaces through websites for every or each of the 19 institutions, including the ministry. Indeed, there are only 2 institutions under the ministry that do not have websites. That's the Center for Distance Learning and Open Schooling, CENLOS, which ironically is the agency in charge of open learning and distance learning. It hasn't got a website. And then Encyclopedia Africana, which is another agency under the Ministry of Education. Apart from these 2, all 17 of the agencies have websites. And so it means that we have actually taken a step in ensuring that we embrace open governance tenets. But what is curious is that out of these 17 that have websites, we realize that with the exception of UNESCO Ghana, the National School Inspectorate Authority, almost all the other institutions did not frequently update their websites. The Ministry of Education, for instance, the last time its website was updated was last year. and we've had websites being updated once a year. If you go to the Get Fund website, for instance, it was updated a long time ago. Now, what is even more curious is that beyond the infrequent updating, what is available on this website? Because websites are supposed to be used as platforms for disseminating information relevant to the public's consumption, including the stakeholder public, both nationally and internationally, globally. If you go to the Education Ministry's website, there is no annual report there. There is no strategic plan there. There is no data on their performance or statistics. There is no report there. If you go to Get Fund's website, there is nothing like Get Fund's annual report. There is no indication of how Get Fund used funds, billions of money that were given to them to administer scholarships and engage in other projects. Right. So you have no sense of how Get Fund is using the money they are receiving every year, and what really are their achievements, what really are their challenges, what really is the way forward. There is no strategic plan, nothing. And it follows for many of the other institutions in the education sector. And so it defeats the very essence of having a website, because even if the website is available, it is absent. Now, on this website are published telephone numbers, which was one good thing about all of them. Every institution had an official telephone line and an official email address. But unfortunately, only one of the institutions, including the ministry, only one responded to emails that were sent to them in the 3 weeks of data collection. That is from February 15th to the first week of March. Only one. Only UNESCO Ghana. Well, none of them respond to their emails. And when you have an irresponsive email address listed on the website as an official email address, and there is no mechanism to respond to emails, one wonders really whether the email address is actually fulfilling its purpose or not. When it comes to telephone numbers also advertised on this website, over 10 of the institutions failed to respond to telephone calls. And I'm talking about 10 telephone calls placed to the institutions during the period of data collection over the 3-week period, I must say. The institutions that picked up their calls, their own advertised official phone lines, included CODVET, which is now the TVET Commission, the National School Inspectorate Authority, UNESCO Ghana, among others. Get Fund, for instance, never picked any of their calls advertised on their websites or their social media handles for the 3-week period. The Ministry of Education's phone line doesn't even work. If you call, the call doesn't even go through. So just
to be fair, Kofi, I'd like to find out, for example, how many times did you place calls to these entities? Do you have a log of the number of times you made calls to them?
Yeah, we placed 10 calls within a period of 15 days. We placed 10 calls within a period of 15 days. So each of them, we write the time we place the call, and then the number to every institution. So 10 calls if you have 3 numbers, we call the numbers 10 times each, so 30 calls within a 15-day period. And even if you call the numbers today, no one will pick up. Majority of them are call numbers that are not even working. And so the essence of advertising those numbers on their website is actually defeated. Finally, on social media, we all know that Twitter and Facebook provides an opportunity to reach out to a 3 billion audience globally. It was good to know that the Ghana Education Service had a verified social media handle. Unfortunately, they were the only institution that had a verified social media handle. All the other 18 institutions did not have verified social media handles, even though about 17 out of them had social media handles. Why it is a challenge is that the absence of a verified social media handle allowed for impersonation of the institutions. For instance, WAEC, because WAEC did not have a verified social media handle, there were over 10 Facebook pages claiming to be WAEC, 10. So why wouldn't rogues impersonate you and then be using your name to sell Apple when there are 10 Facebook pages all claiming to be WAEC? Meanwhile, among the 10, only one is likely to be genuine, but no one knows what that particular one is, because they are all using the same official logo, the same address and everything. And so the absence of verified social media handles was one of the key issues we thought could be addressed to ensure that there is credibility and and also stakeholder acceptance,
right.
Increased stakeholder acceptance in the quality of information churned out on this social media website.
Okay. Let me now bring in Peter Anti, Executive Director, Institute for Education Studies. Thank you for joining the conversation. Now, you've seen this report, and some of what it reveals is damning. I mean, look at what Kofi was just mentioning, making mention of. On social media, 10 accounts. All for one institution, but only one of them would be genuine. In fact, you might find that none of them is genuine because maybe that organization is not even on that platform. How much of a worry is this when it comes to accountability, transparency, responsiveness of the educational system, the Ministry of Education and its 18 agencies?
Thank you very much, and greetings to my brother, Kofi. I think it's a good work that they have done. I went through the reports. I couldn't join during the lunch, but I went through the reports, and it's an interesting work that they've put out there. I over the years we have had an issue with how these agencies deal with the people they work with. First of all, I have to state that we need to understand that when you talk of a sector like education, we always say that you are dealing with everybody in the country. You are dealing with everybody in the country because you have a sister in school, you have a brother, a cousin. So by design, everybody has got something to do with the education system, which means that information from that sector should be readily available to everybody so that people can really assess this information and then know what to do. Apart from that, the stakeholders, the rest stakeholders in the sector, if you are very observant, you will see that over the years, if you have challenges with maybe your registration number, I mean, in terms of as a teacher, you have challenges with your appointment letter and all those things. They demand, or the system demands, that you move from wherever you are to Accra to have a face-to-face interaction with whoever is in charge of that particular portfolio, and then they will try to rectify it for you. And that has created some sort of corruption in the system. So when I saw the report, all that I said was, look, Kofi, you want to spoil somebody's business, because when they put some of this information out there, yes, I have to say, sometimes it is deliberate. If they put some of this information out there, you cut the human interface, the link between the one who is in trouble, who is seeking for information, and the one who is available to produce.
Peter, a quick question there for you, Peter. Are you suggesting that these institutions sometimes intentionally stifle, for example, the media people in the educational sector like you, of information just to cut corners? Are you ascribing corruption to these institutions?
I'm saying that the system is designed in such a way that people would always want to have a face-to-face interaction with those that need certain kinds of information. And the reason for that would be varied. One of them is the show of power, to show people that, look, we have power, we'll be able to deal with you if you have challenges within the system. Another reason could be that some people in the system benefit from the lack of information out there. And when that happens, it means that you would have to now go through whoever is supposed to give you that information, and then they are able to do whatever they want to do with it.
So corruption, like I said.
Accountability, and then transparency that you are asking about. So it is very disturbing. It is very disturbing because there's a sector that is dealing with a lot of people. You will need to put most information online for people to access. If operating a website is difficult, I don't think operating a Facebook account, a verified Facebook account, is also difficult. But unfortunately, these things are not operational, and it's disheartening to some of us, because look, sometimes you need information from an agency, and it's either you have a friend in there who will be able to help you navigate through the process system, and then you get the information, or you forget it, because the system will stress you to the extent that it becomes difficult for you to get some of the information. there are reports that are released every day. If you go to most of these educational organizations, I mean outside the country, international education organizations, they release reports every day. They just put the reports on their website. You really assess it. You use it for your analysis. You use it for your work. It enriches the kind of discussion that you undertake in this sector. But when it comes to Ghana, it is very difficult for you to get some of these documents. I think we should have the education sector performance report for 2020 on the website. We don't have it. Even when you Google on the internet, it is not there. Difficult to get. There are so many reports that are generated within the system that should be already available for people in the sector. And because they don't have these platforms operating or working, you don't have them, and you will need to write to assess some of these reports that for us we think are just for public consumption. So it's a very an eye-opening research work that has been carried out. We think that the people will take it in good faith and start working on this. I don't think the challenges maybe we might be talking about the challenges that they are facing. Yes, maybe the capacity is not there, but I think that we are in a time where we are training people to become more ICT proficient and competent. So right. if you have challenges with that, you should be able to train your staff to handle some of these things, because information in the 21st century in this time it's money. It's important. You need it to be able to plan your life. You need it to be able to do so many things. And when we are able to get this information to the general public, it will cut so much of the waste and corruption in the system that people are also using to enrich themselves.
Let me cross over to Kofi now, and very important points made by Peter Anti in respect of the lack of information flow and what negative impact it could have. But Kofi, there are some 10 indices that you used to assess these institutions, including the availability of a website, the updating of the website, whether they have an official email or call line that people can engage them on, verifiable handle on social media and all of that. Now, walk us through these 10 indices very briefly, and do let us know, at any point, did you bother to assess the institutions in terms of those that are the best performing and those that are the worst performing? Is that something you look forward to doing, Kofi?
Yeah, exactly. The indices begin with the availability of a website, and if there is one. The second one is the frequency of updating the website. The third is the content available on the website. Our interest was to ensure that the website was not just existing, but contained information relevant for public consumption or information needed by stakeholders, especially your sector, your performance plans, your performance reports, your strategic plans, and relevant policies and laws, underpinning your work. In addition to that, we also had indexes including the availability of social media handles, the interactivity of social media handles, the availability of official email addresses, responsiveness of the addresses, and availability of official telephone numbers published on your websites and social media handles, and the responsiveness of the telephone numbers. The last one was the availability of an information officer. The last one is very important because according to the RTI law, information officers or RTI officers must be present in all these agencies whose job will include, among others, processing information requested by the public. Realize that only 2 of the institutions, the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences and the GES, had received the deployment of RTI officers till date. So these 10 indicators on the website that I mentioned, UNESCO scored the highest, in all the rankings. UNESCO Ghana has benchmarks or has standards that we think are worthy of emulating. For that matter, we recommended a peer review system within the education ministry where agencies would meet periodically. I'm talking about the communication and then the heads of the institutions themselves to review their performances in respect of open governance, and then see what UNESCO, for instance, is doing good that others can emulate. The National School Inspection Authority was second. They had 8 points. UNESCO had 9. The only thing UNESCO didn't have was the RTI officer. The National School Inspection Authority did fantastic. They had 8. And they placed second in that case. The only 2 things they did not have was the RTI officer and also an irresponsive email. The email address on their website, you send an email and you don't get a response. CODVET, as I mentioned, the National Commission on TVET was third. They had 7 points. They didn't have an IT officer. They didn't have a functioning email system. And also, they did not have their performance reports or annual reports, strategic plans on their website. 3 other institutions joined CODVET in placing third. And these were the Ghana Book Development Council, WAEC, GES, and the Ghana Library Authority. What made them, had only 7 points was that they did not have the IT officer. They did not have reports on their website. They all did not have responsive email addresses as well. Now, in the case of WAEC, when we called WAEC, when the data collectors called WAEC responded on their telephone line, and they requested for a copy of their annual report. They actually indicated that the process for obtaining the annual report required that we write a hard copy letter to WAEC, submit it in person, and then after they have accepted the request, we will pay an amount of money before we'll be giving the annual report. This is the culture in most of the institutions we are working with. And while we are not blaming an institution for behaving in a manner inconsistent with open governance tenets in a democracy, we appreciate that we are moving from a culture of non-disclosure with exemptive disclosures to a culture of full disclosure with minimal exemptions and non-disclosures. And in migrating from this opaque culture to this otherwise transparent culture, there will be challenges because the institutional cultures supports the retention of information. The staff of Get Fund is trained, is oriented to believe that it is a taboo to put out the number of people and the names of people who benefited from Get Fund scholarship in a particular year. It will only take a parliamentary inquiry or the summons of the Auditor General to release that information out, and that information must be secret. That is how they have been trained to believe. That is perhaps how their appointers mandated them to go and behave. And that is why it has become a culture there, that Get Fund information is a secret. It's a secret. There's nothing about their performance report, nothing about their strategic plan, nothing about any report. There's nothing about, the only report you had, once in 6 years, you see Auditor General are taking the performance audits, and then it will bring a lot of buha, and then it dies down, and then they go back and do the same thing that was going on. So they will not let anyone know what is going on. So that culture is what we are trying to gradually, support the institutions to migrate from and move into a culture of transparency.
Right.
And it will take time. It will not take just the RTI law to break this gem. It will take some time. And that is why we are saying that we are not faulting any institution. We have had discussions with some of the institutions. Yesterday, we had discussions with the National Teaching Council. They genuinely accepted the challenges that they have. And they also indicated the plans they had to, as much as possible, embrace all the 10 indicators that we have put out. We had discussions with the Student Loan Trust Fund. They took part in the launch, actually. And so we are having discussions with the institutions, just like those who are amenable to such information and are ready to change. Okay. Some of them too obviously will not be interested until there is an administrative fiat by the Ministry of Education, which is their supervising agency, before they will adopt a policy that supports information management in a more open governance style.
Kofi, before we look at some of the recommendations that you have put forward, I was going to ask the question, you took the wind out of my sail there, because I wanted to find out what the response has been from these institutions. Now, you did indicate a short while ago that some of them were amenable to the report and that they had, started maybe putting in place some mechanisms. But what has been the response generally across these 18 agencies, including the Ministry of Education itself? And maybe what are some of the institutions, which are they, that are not responsive to what you've come out with in this report?
Well, we just launched the report yesterday, and we haven't started, we just started engaging the institutions from yesterday. And as I mentioned, we so far engaged 2 institutions, that's the National Teaching Council and then the Student Loan Trust Funds. But prior to the launch, I had discussion with the minister. I sent a copy of the report 3 days ahead of the launch to the minister and the GNS Director General. I sent it to the minister because our strategy for engagement includes engaging the ministry to adopt a standard information management policy for its agencies, which has a monitoring mechanism where the ministry will supervise compliance. So the ministry plays a key role in its own agency's acceptance of the recommendations we have made. We know how most of the agencies behave. Their behavior will always be, most of them will always behave in a way that will suggest that they want to protect the existing order. But our strategy is to go through the ministry, have acceptance at that level, so that the remaining will be directed from the mother agency, the mother ministry, to the agencies. Alongside that, so we are here to have a formal meeting. We are planning to have a formal meeting with the ministry and all the agency heads, where we are going to present this report to them in the presence of the minister, and then have discussions about how collectively, as agencies under the ministry and as a ministry, they can put in place policy measures, administrative measures to ensure that there is compliance to the open governance standards that we have set for ourselves as a nation. Okay. And so we will update the media and other stakeholders on the progress we make in holding such meeting. But that meeting is going to happen anytime soon. We are going to write to the minister requesting for that meeting in the next week, so that commitment will be secured early enough, so that as much as possible, these are things that can be done in the short term. Every agency populates their websites. If you don't have another report, start developing it for the one for 2020, because we need to quickly move, take advantage of the change of the transition to a new administration, and expect that the new leader will buy into most of these democracy issues, and let's make our institutions better for the citizenry. For us, that's the main objective of this exercise. Okay,
so before we take a swipe at the 6-point list of recommendations, let me bring in Peter. Now, this report is out, and the institutions involved or concerned are also over the next few days going to have the opportunity of receiving this report and reacting to it. What would be your expectations? How are you hoping that these institutions would take the report and maybe run with it? What are your expectations, Peter?
Well, I'm expecting that they will be receptive of the information that have been put out. Of course, we are developing the sector, and if your agency is found to not to have obeyed some of the things that you're supposed to do in terms of information delivery to the public, it is just an avenue for you to amend these ways and put together a structure that will enable you to deliver information to the public. And I think that they would accept because this is not something that is difficult to do. It just requires technical expertise and then some level of resources to be committed to it, and then you get somebody to be in charge of your media. Most of them have PRO units, so it's not something that is difficult to do. So the heads of these agencies should, as quickly as possible, as they lay hands on these reports, put together their PR unit, engage them, ask them what they need to be able to update their websites, to get a functioning Facebook account and Twitter. I think these two are enough for the general public, so that they could, as time goes on, release or put some of this information on this platform for all of us to have access to. So we are expecting that they will be receptive to the information when provided to them.
Okay, let me come back to you, Kofi. So very briefly, I want you to walk us through the 6-point recommendation that you have put forward. and what exactly they encompass?
Well, our recommendations, first of all, border on the Ministry of Education itself, adapting a standard information management policy for its agencies and putting in place monitoring mechanisms, to monitor compliance. I'll give you an example, which is the second recommendation. The Ministry of Education should consider procuring an IVR, an interactive voice response system. If you go to other countries like Norway, in Denmark, for instance, I've seen also in Argentina, their Ministry of Education normally operates this IVR system. The IVR system simply requires that if I want to contact the Ministry of Education or any of its agencies, for instance, I dial 900. If you dial 900, the automated response will come. If you want to go to GES, press 1, CODVET, press 2, WAEC, press 3. If I press 3, the IVR will distribute my call to WAEC on the system of the Ministry of Education. Then WAEC's phone number will ring. If WAEC does not pick the call, at the end of the month, the ministry will request for the itemized call. The ministry will know the number of calls that were distributed to agencies that were not answered. On the basis of that, the ministry is able to monitor the compliance of its agencies to its communication or information management system. This is one way the ministry can sit there and monitor the extent to which agencies are responding to calls. Some can even go further and even call a sample of those callers to find out why you contacted WAEC and whether your issue was resolved. That is one way the ministry can monitor compliance or responsiveness of its agencies to calls. Apart from that, the Ministry of Education must set up a professional website. Its website presently is not professional. It is full of broken links and does not befit the status of a ministry, which is the biggest ministry in Ghana, commanding a budget 10 times bigger than other ministries. And so the website itself must be professional, and it's actually not a safe website. In IT sense, they say a website is not safe. It's not a safe website with numerous broken links. The third is that the Ghana Education Service is the biggest service in Ghana. It is bigger than about 4 ministries put together. The GES website must be redesigned so that they can have regional education directories and all over 200 district education offices listed on the website with their telephone numbers and email addresses, all functioning. So that if you want to contact the district director for Ejura Secretary and find out about an issue that came to you at multimedia, you go to the GES website, you should be able to have the contact number of the district education office in Ejura. You don't have to be swimming in the tide to find that. And so that is a recommendation to the GES and all other decentralized agencies in the under the Ministry of Education. Communication officers must be mandated to handle email addresses and giving clear KPIs, which should be reviewed periodically, so that we are sure that emails are not just being sent and received, but they are being responded to. Same way, telephone lines in the short term. In addition to that, we are recommending that all agencies must have verified social media presence on Facebook and Twitter, at least for these two, which commands a 3 billion global audience. Having verified social media audience shouldn't be too difficult an issue to surmount, in the short term. And then finally, we want the Ministry of Education to issue orders to all the agencies to upload their performance reports, their financial reports, relevant data on their various sectors or subsectors, and most importantly, policies and laws relating to their work on their website, so that the public, the stakeholder public, the media, CSOs, anyone living in China can just log on to their website and access information about how they are faring, what they are doing, so that others can learn, so that we can also equally advocate for quality where there is a need to do so. These are the recommendations that have been made to the Ministry of Education and its agencies. And we hope that the ministry will embrace these recommendations in good faith and adapt them to improve the quality of governance in our public governance system within the education sector.
And that is our hope, all of us, that indeed they will take stock of them, and those that they can immediately start applying, they do so. But before we wrap on this conversation, there's something, good news that we've, got wind of in recent times. And the former education minister was telling us about how for 6 consecutive years, Ghana has been topping the WASI. And recently we were told that 88%, 411 out of 465 of the straight A's were actually produced from right here in Ghana, with the rest going to Nigeria. Peter, would you say that is vindication of the free SHS, system? What do you think this implies in real terms?
I think that somewhere in November, we said that we should be careful ascribing some of these successes in the education sector, what basically are outputs to a single policy that have run for just a year. There are no scientific scientific evidence to show that the students pass because of the free SHS, unless, of course, I'm giving data to analyze, and I'm able to control so many factors that can be ascribed to students' performance in an exam. I will never be able to professionally assert that students passed the exam this last year because of a single policy that ran for 3 years. That would be professionally that would be professionally not right. We need to state that although students seem to be performing well in their academic achievement when it comes to these exams, these are just outputs. The way we measure the quality of education within a system goes beyond academic achievement, and that is the point that we've been missing since day one when we talk about quality education in our system. It goes beyond the student's ability to pass an examination. It should transcend to the student's ability to be productive to the entire economy, to the entire society. And that is where outcome comes in. And we have said this over and over again. So until we see the education system transforming the economy, transforming the human resource to be able for them to contribute to the total development of Ghana, where our GDP will continue to push up, and we see other things happening, it will be difficult for us to say concretely that the students passing WASSCE with 8 A's or a number of A's means that our education system is top-notch. No, it means that we are doing well, but the output that we are getting are short-term a result of our educational policies. How long-term will these policies enable the country to move from where we are to a more productive society? That is how I always look at some of these things. So free SHS is doing well, but it will be unprofessional to ascribe any performance in WASSCE to free SHS alone.
Okay, so I'll take your take actually on the same matter, Kofi. The year before, we had 220 straight A's and still topped in West Africa. This time we have 411 of them. Would you ascribe this giant leap to free SHS and maybe its benefits?
Let me say that the free senior high school policy should always not be decoupled from secondary education. And so we are better off saying secondary education, because when we pass BEC, we don't talk FQ, we talk about BEC. So why do we talk about free senior high school when we talk about WASSCE? So we must disconnect it from free senior high school. We've always, in the past, performed creditably well compared to the other 4 countries in WAEC. And as you mentioned, yes, we've always been topping that league for the past 7 or so years. And it's a good idea. It's a good feeling and good to know that we are still topping. And I congratulate the teachers of these students, and also I congratulate the students, for putting up that performance within a COVID environment. Having said that, it is very important for us to appreciate the fact that it is the equation, the story of last year's examination performance can never be complete without situating it within the context which the examinations were written. For the first time in the history of WAEC 50 plus years in Ghana and the entire West African subcontinent, there is no time in the issue of WAEC where the telephone numbers, the email addresses, the schools, the subject areas of its markers, the examiners, those who marked last year's papers, were leaked on social media. It hasn't happened any time in any country in the past 5.5 decades of WAEC existence. Second, in Ghana, amongst all the 5 countries, Ghana is the only country where WAEC issued a statement to admit that there was a leakage. I'm not talking about media alleging. I'm not talking about education. I'm talking about WAEC themselves issuing a statement to admit. These 2 leakages were all confirmed in WAEC issued statements. So if we really understand that leakage in questions, but more specifically, leakages in the contact details of examiners can affect the quality of the results, then we shouldn't look at one aspect, that's the beneficiary of the leakages, and forget about how to ensure that our system is made more credible moving forward. So in conclusion, I will say that the story of last year's WASSCE is never complete without considering the environment within which the examinations were written. First, COVID. Second, for the first time in WAEC's history, leakage in the contact details of its markers and examiners, and the same markers were used to mark the Ghanaian papers. And then third, admitted leakage in papers. Let me finally say that we will be launching our report on the WAEC examination sometime in the next month. And so when we launch the report, it's taking about 6 months to put together this report because the people who are feeding into the report are many. We want to document the processes from before the examination, during the examination, what took place from between WAEC's office and headquarters through to their strong rooms in the regions, the role that the police played, to the schools, invigilators. We are doing a whole comprehensive value chain analysis report of what actually went on last year. And we'll publish it in the next month so that we can have a basis to actually interrogate our assessment system and embrace change to make it stronger and more, leak-proof. But I congratulate the teachers and the students.
Okay.
And also the government for supporting them in school to achieve this feat.
Kofi, thank you very much for joining the conversation. Kofi Asare, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. And to you, Peter, as well. Peter Anti, Executive Director, Institute for Education Studies. Gentlemen, we're very grateful for your time. And we look forward to the very best, the golden era, if you like, for our educational system in the years to come.